To kick things off, it's my honor to introduce Visible Ink mentor, comedy genius, and fabulous all-around human, Bill Persky. Bill is a five-time Emmy Award-winning writer, director, and producer for such legendary TV series as The Dick Van Dyke Show, Sid Caesar's Show of Shows, and Kate and Allie. He created the classic sitcom That Girl, and he elevated female characters on television, depicting Marlo Thomas, Mary Tyler Moore, and others for the first time as strong, independent women. Bill is a contributing writer to USA Today and the LA Times. He's also a guest lecturer at NYU Film School, Yale, and Columbia Universities. He was the recipient of a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Writers Guild of America, a Giant of Television Award from the Radio and Television Executive Society, and a Doctor of Humane Letters from New Haven University. I highly recommend his memoir, My Life is a Situation Comedy. To know Bill is to love him, and I have the great privilege of knowing him and counting him as a treasured friend. Take it away, Bill.
Thank you very much. I have been more nervous about this evening than anything I've done because of my regard and respect and concern for the audience. I love you all. I've worked with many of you. I don't know how many of you are watching this, but it's an honor to be part of this organization. I don't have the credits in front of me of my friends who have joined me for this evening, but I'll start with Adriana Trigiani, who has more #1 New York seller books than I have read in my lifetime. She's a film director, she's a television writer, and one of the most giving and caring people I have ever met. I've known her. She was my protege. I gave her her first job in television, and I was her mentor, and now she is mine. Alan Zweibel I have known about forever because all of the good things that I have watched have been written by Alan. He was on Saturday Night Live, one of the original writers. He co-created It's Gary Shandling's show, and he really could have stopped there because that was so special and broke down so many barriers. He's the only person, when Judith sent us a note and said, send a short bio, Alan wrote back and said, how short? Because if you look at his credits, he could have taken up the entire time we have. It's interesting that his latest achievement is a movie that's opening tomorrow called Here Today, starring Billy Crystal and Tiffany Haddish. And it's almost kismet that this particular movie fits in with our subject tonight about how to find humor in situations that aren't funny. And he's a new friend of mine, but I feel I've known him for a long time. Alan Zweibel.
Thank you, Bill. It's my pleasure to be here. You're absolutely right. You know, it's a perfect lead in terms of what we're speaking about tonight. And in particular, you know, since you brought up the movie, in this movie, Billy Crystal plays a veteran comedy writer. We have a couple of them right here in this little powwow that we're doing. And he was modeled after Herb Sargent, if you remember Herb. You know, Herb Sargent was an older guy who was like a mentor to everybody on Saturday Night Live. And Billy plays that kind of character. But when we conceived of the film, we went, you know, we knew that there would be a May-December relationship he would have with a younger woman. But we didn't want the movie just to be those kind of jokes, old, young, and all of that. My dad was going through, had the onset of dementia. And Billy had an aunt around the same time, the same thing. So he gave the character that. He's starting to get dementia, starting to get the symptoms of it. He was writing a book about his departed wife and was struggling and wanted to have, he wanted to finish it before he ran out of his words altogether. He meets Tiffany Haddish, and at first it's a very deep friendship, which is really fun and funny. But when she realizes what's going on with him, she becomes his muse and helps him get to the point where he can finish the book despite everything. And I think that it does fit into our theme tonight because it's about taking the hand that God gives you at any given moment in your life, dealing with it, and somehow getting through the other side.
I should mention that the reviews for this picture are amazing. And I also, as I told Alan in our conversations earlier on email, I think that this movie arrived at a time when we need it. No one knows quite where we're going. And there's been a lot of different kinds of crazy comedies and violence. And this is a movie about humanity. And I think that that's what we're trying to get back to. And I think it's also part of what is the struggle when you are hit with something like cancer and you want to stay part of the human race and you want to have a sense of yourself as a person and that you're not closed off into a corner. I mean, there is nothing funny about the word cancer. No way can you say, oh, I've got cancer, and someone says, good for you, you know? And what goes on in the process is not funny either. The only thing that is humor is the human side of it. That's the source of humor. And it's the ability to find your humanity, which is found through comedy, or if not comedy, just the sense of, isn't this a pain in the ass? How did this happen to me? Who asked for this, you know? I mean, I got involved with Visible Ink because I got cancer, but I never felt that I deserved to talk about cancer because I had prostate cancer, and most of what happened to me as a result because of radiation happened afterwards to my broken body. But the only thing that happened to me when I found out that I had cancer was that they immediately gave me a female hormone that they give to stop the growth of the cancer. And so I immediately got menopause. I would be sitting on a bus and break out in hot flashes. People were looking at me. My breasts were good size. So when people have cancer, it's just so awful. And all I have is, I ended up with some bone things, but I've mentored enough people to know what you go through. So Carol Burnett, I mean, there have been so many things written about humor and tragedy. And I think she said it best is that it's pain plus time. And I don't think you can right away get into it. But in time, and especially when you're talking to people about it, you don't want them to feel sorry for you. You kind of want to make fun of yourself along the way. And that's what we're trying to, tonight, maybe show you a way to do. Adri?
Well, just off of what you're saying, what Alan said, if to all the Visible Ink spots that are listening and are making notes because you're formulating what you're writing, you just heard what the bottom line is truth. So if you begin with the essence of what you're going through, the reality, the truth of it, there's always humor in that. And bigger than that, if you begin to write in truth, you can't stop, because it's the most effective connection you have to another human being when they're reading your work. I learned it from these two. So I was not surprised at all when Alan said Billy's aunt, in his family, we all know somebody. the first thing that Bill Persky taught me, and this is important, it's really important. If it happened to you, it's interesting. If it's the 10th generation of something that happened to somebody else, no one cares. So your experience is the most important aspect of what you're doing and why we're here. And don't be scared of it. Put it down. And then there's just one other thing I want to say before I punt it back to Bill and Alan. If you find yourself, as you're writing, feeling exposed or feeling vulnerable, or that funny feeling you get when you saw somebody across a crowded room before you fell in love with them, that's a good thing. Don't be afraid of it, because that's where the gold is. And that's where the healing is.
Alan?
Well, yeah, something to expound on that just a little bit. Neil Simon, who was one of my heroes, he wrote a piece for the arts and leisure section of the Sunday New York Times, which later became a foreword for one of his anthologies. And it stayed with me. And he described the comedy writer as a two-headed monster. One head lives this life. You get stuck in traffic, you go to an ATM, you have a root canal, and then all of a sudden, without announcement or provocation, another head emerges and hovers a little bit above the first head and makes fun of the life that the first head is living. And I think and I made my wife read that before we got engaged, because I wanted her to know what she was living with. If I'm just, she would come home after we got married and I'm sitting in the apartment like this, and she would have bags and boxes and says, can you help me? And I said, can't you see I'm working? Okay, I was just sitting there. So it is something about the acknowledgement of anybody who wants to write. You go with it. You embrace it. We as writers, we as comedy writers, we're blessed. We're really blessed, because it's like Adriana just said, if you go for the truth, it's liberating, and the honesty of it and the spin that you put on it will put you in a very, very strong place. But you've got to get there. You can't gloss over it. Get to the essence of it and write from there. And everything that you write afterwards, even if it isn't as funny as you'd like it to be, there's going to be an honesty there, and you're going to be dealing with something which is really substantial, and I think we're blessed with this. Sometimes it feels like a curse because you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you scribble something, okay? But the fact of the matter is, we can stick our pens in our hearts and just start writing. Let truth flow onto the page. And it's a mindset. So I envy anybody who does or wants to do what we do, because it's very liberating.
I think that the difference is that with people who deal with comedy, there is an immediate synapse of what you want to say and how you want to say it. And that's where the comedy comes from, the spontaneity of, I am being an asshole and this is why. It just jumps. People who aren't comedy writers have the ability to do that if they figure out what is they want to say, and is there a kind of a clearer, funny, not necessarily even funny, but more specific. I mean, one example that I always come to, because it's the perfect example of what happened. My wife is from Florida, the panhandle of Florida, so I don't have to tell you a lot more, except she's a liberal. And she comes from Panama City, and she got this cookbook from the church. And she said, well, this sounds crazy, but kind of interesting. And I said, well, okay. It was called Gloriata Chicken. And the recipe was sauteed chicken with mushroom soup and Kraft ranch dressing and mushroom. I mean, it was, when it arrived, it looked like home plate on my plate. It was just this mass of white. And she said, well, what do you think after I tasted it? And I said, what time do we land? And it was not that it tastes like airplane food. I didn't say that because my mind automatically went to, this is airplane food. What time do we land? And that's what I'm talking about. You can get there. We seem to get there the moment that the first thought comes.
Yeah, we go beyond it. We identify the airplane food and go, okay, where do I go from there?
Right. Yeah.
Staying with the airplane food. And it's and there's an assumption that everybody else will understand with the joke where we are and why we're saying it and what it's about. And it advances things. It advances things. And if it's received with a laugh, all right, there's a connection that's made. That's what laughter is. It's connection among people. You know, you're seeing the same thing, hearing the same thing, you're laughing together. I can't for the life of me think of anything that's more bonding than a laugh that is shared by people at the same time. So I understand the airplane food thing totally.
Aid?
Well, I just had a conversation with Michael J. Fox, who is a brilliant comedian, actor, and he is now writing. And I want everybody to hear this. He's writing, and he just put a book out. But we talked about where he goes. And this is important for everybody that's listening because he said everybody has Parkinson's. Everybody has cancer. So I said, well, what exactly do you mean by that? He said, everybody has something. And it's your job to figure out how to live in the world with the something, staying connected. So he told this hilarious thing. It was like something Bill or Alan would write about one of his caregivers. She was a little rough. He changed her name in the book, and I imagined her in the description to look like Margaret Rutherford, if you all remember her. Sometimes if you think of somebody funny, it helps you get into a scene. She would push the wheelchair so quickly, felt like he was going to get jet propelled out of the seat. And this is on New York City streets. And it was like the French Connection. She would go around it like the baby carriage stuff. And he was just sitting in the chair, just shaking. And then he said that we went over something. Now, I prayed it was a curb, but I think it was a foot. And when he said that, I thought, oh, it's so brilliant. He took like a horrible thing and turned it into something hilarious. Now, when you're writing the exact truth of something, it's really funny. You don't have to even try to be funny. And Bill, I think you can explain it better than me because you taught me how to do it.
I don't know. You know, it's hard to bring up other subjects when you're talking to cancer patients because it's like saying, well, this is the same thing. And it's only the same thing.
It is, Bill, but everybody's
because it's the humanity of where you find yourself, what pain you're in, and what you're going through.
Right.
And I remember in my marriage ended and I was devastated. Not the one I have now. Thank God she's never going anywhere. Are you? Anyway, he didn't answer.
She's already gone. She was packing.
He left
too late. Anyway,
packing the Uber.
It was so terrible. But it coincided with my ending my business relationship with my partner, Sam Denoff, after 21 successful years. My wife leaving, second wife leaving, and me getting custody of my 12-year-old daughter whose mother did not want her as part of her life. So it was a very busy day. And I was like, oh my God, what has happened to me? And so I talked about this on a talk show in LA and told this incident. And I think it goes to what Alan was saying and both of you were saying about honesty. When you are willing to put that vulnerable, asshole, frightened, whatever it is, when you're able to put that out there, you touch people. And on this radio show, there were 12 telephones for, incoming calls. And we'd gotten a couple. And then he said, well, I understand you just went through this experience and with your daughter and your wife and your partnership, and that it must have been very difficult. I said, it was devastating, and it still is. I said, but one night early on, I was lying in bed crying. I just couldn't help myself from crying. And I said, I thought, I have to sing. And the only thing I could think of was the Star Spangled Banner. So I stood up in bed to sing, and he said, you stood up in bed? I said, well, yeah, it was the Star Spangled Banner. All 12 phones lit up at the exact same moment. Now, how outlandish a thing could I have said that was more personal and more foolish, and yet 12 people immediately knew what I was talking about?
Yeah, that's what it's about. And when we're talking about cancer, we're all connected to cancer, whether we have had it, whether we're in treatment, whether it's in the rearview mirror. It affects everyone. So if something affects everyone, what's interesting about that? The specificity of your experience, the particular details of your experience, however you see it. And it can be, Bill, Alan, don't you think you can interpret your story in any way you wish? You could make it fanciful like you did with the Gilda Radner show. There were parts of that to me that were whimsical. Bill, when you write, you tend to speak directly to the audience. And when you talk to us. So it's almost a conversation happening.
Alan has, I think, the most relatable, and certainly something that everybody, whether there were 3 of you or 4 of you, I don't know, but that everyone will relate to, and that is his relationship with Gilda Radner, which was a very special one. And Alan's new book, Making Funny People Funny. I'm going to say the wrong title because I forgot it. What is it, Alan? Making Funny, Laugh Line. Yeah, Making Funny. I thought of the explanation, Laugh Line. And in it, that section about you and Gilda is heartbreaking, and it's funny, and it was not an easy thing, I'm sure, for you to write.
I can tell you a little history between me and Gilda. And
take all the time you want.
Okay. Gilda, the very, very first day of Saturday Night Live, July 7th, 1975, I was a joke writer for the Catskill Comedians. And, I used to go up to their homes, and I'd write jokes for these guys. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I took about 1,100 jokes that they wouldn't buy from me because I was 21. I couldn't relate to jokes about paving the driveway, or my wife wouldn't sleep with me because she just came back from the hairdresser. I was lucky enough to be discovered by Lorne Michaels, who may be one of the original writers on SNL. And it was the very first day. And we met in Lorne's office, and I'm looking around, and I see John Belushi, I see Dan Aykroyd, I see Lorraine Newman. I had never heard of Second City. I had never heard of the Groundlings. I wrote jokes for guys who just put it out there straight ahead. Here they were making characters, dealing with each other, and the synergy was scenes that I never saw this before. And I went, God, there's not a chance in hell I can compete or keep up with these guys. So what I did was, in the corner of Lauren's office, there was a potted plant. I went behind it and I squatted down. Biggest day of my life. First day on the job as a TV comedy writer. I'm squatting behind a plant. The meeting starts, and all of a sudden, from the other side of the plant, I hear a girl's voice saying, "Can you help me be a parakeet?" I parted the leaves and I looked out, and it was Gilda. And I said, "What?" She says, "Yeah, I think it'd be really funny if I scrunched up my face and stood on a perch and acted like a parakeet. But I need a writer to help me figure out what the parakeet should say. Are you a good parakeet writer?" I had no idea what she was talking about, but I'm going, "I'm a great parakeet writer." She said, "Good, good." She said, "Why are you behind the plant? Nervous?" I said, "Yeah, a little bit." She said, "Your first TV show, Alan?" I said, "Yeah. How you know my name is Alan?" She said, "You're the only one wearing a name tag." Okay. I'm such a nerd. She said, "Listen, is there any more room behind the potted plant?" I said, "Yeah, why?" She says, "Well, it's also my first TV show and I'm nervous." So I scooched over, she came around and she's squatting next to me. And that's where I met my buddy Gilda. And we made each other laugh. We got to know each other. We even had our first fight behind this potted plant. She offered me gum. I said, "Sure, I'll take gum." And she handed me, this is in the 70s, one of those big cloth pocketbooks that was the size of my high school. She says, "Go, take some gum." And I said, "It's in there?" She said, "Yeah." I said, I can't do that." She said, "You said you wanted gum. Open the zipper, reach inside and take gum." And I said, "I can't do that." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm a boy and you're a girl, and there may be some things inside of that pocketbook that will eventually end up inside of you. And I'm a writer with a very vivid imagination. So yes, I do want some gum, but can you please serve it to me?" He said, "You're Jewish, aren't you?" I said, "A little." She says, "No, you're like a monster Jew." And we had this tug of war with the pocketbook. And all of a sudden you hear Lauren going, "Alan, where's Alan? I saw him here before." And she goes, "He wants to hear your ideas for sketches. Do you have any?" I said, "Yeah, but they stink and I don't like talking in front of people." She said, "I'll take care of it." She got up, she went in front of the plant and addressed the room, referred to me behind the plant and said, "Zweibella's got this great idea where I play a parakeet." She attributed her idea to me. And she said, "We're going to be writing partners and platonic friends forever." Okay. Now, the writing partner part I was thrilled with. The platonic friend, I was already in love. And especially at that age, okay, no, there's usually one person who doesn't want it to be platonic. All right, but if those are the rules, I'll play by them. And one day you'll open your eyes and see the glory that's before you. Okay. So we started this show and I wrote for everybody, but Gilda in particular. And we created some memorable characters, one like Emily Latella, who was an old lady who misheard editorials, and another one named Rosanna Dana. And it was our sublimation. We would write, and then after it was on the air, we wouldn't be talking. It was like at least all of my sexual tension went into the work. And after we left SNL, I stayed in New York. Gilda moved out to LA, eventually married Gene Wilder. And then when I went out to LA to do a pilot for a TV show called It's Gary Shandling Show, I wanted to jumpstart my platonic relationship with Gilda. There was no emails, there was no internet, so it got reduced to birthday cards and an occasional phone call. But even then, the 3-hour difference between the coasts, if she would be on a set, came into play. So I would ask her out, and she'd always said yes. And at the last minute, she always broke the date. This happened 3 or 4 times. I called my wife, Robin, back in New York, and I said, "I don't think Gilda wants to be my platonic friend anymore." And I told her what I just told you. Robin called Gilda. Robin calls me back, and she says, "Call Gilda. I want you to call her right now." I called her. I go, "What's going on?" And she said, "Hi, Zweibel." I said, "Gilda, what's happening here?" She says, well, I haven't been feeling well. And I go, what's wrong? She says, I have Epstein-Barr virus. Do you know what that is? I said, yeah, that's like mono, right? And she said, yes, why about? She says, my mind wants to do everything I always did, but my body just won't let me. And I said, well, what did the doctors say? Well, the doctors say it's definitely Epstein-Barr and it's got to run its course. When are you coming back out? I said, well, if the show gets sold, I'll be back out in California in 6 weeks to hire a staff and start the show. She says, call me. I went back to Jersey where we now lived. I went back to LA 6 weeks later and I rented a house. And this may come as a shock to both of you, Adriana and Bill, but Los Angeles Hollywood is very status conscious. I didn't mean to blindside you like that. But your status in the community can very well be affected by whose house you buy or even rent. I rented a house from Larry Fine from the Three Stooges. Okay, he was my landlord. I go, in the living room, there was a dent in the wall. And I went, oh, Mo must have done that. This place is like a landmark, okay? It was a Saturday, and the big burly men are bringing in the rented furniture into this rented house. And then I hear a voice at the door, hi, Zweibel. And I look over, and it's Gilda. And as a housewarming gift, she had a big potted plant. She brought it in. We put it in the corner. And I looked at her. I said, you look beautiful, honey. How do you feel? And she said, Zweibel, I just found out I don't have Epstein-Barr virus. I said, great, we can go to dinner. We can go to, she says, I have cancer. She was 39. I said, my God. She says, and I need you, Zweibel, to help me get through this part of my life. And I went, what do I do? And she said, make me laugh. And that was my role in my friend's life when she got cancer. I would call her, I would tell her jokes. Gary Shandling and I would do a show every week. We'd send her the cassette like a Hallmark card. All she wanted to do was laugh and think positive about the future. You go to her and Gene Wilder's house, on the refrigerator was a picture of me, Robin, and our now 3 kids, Martin Short and his wife and 3 kids, the director Harold Ramis and his family. And she became a symbol of how to behave when you have cancer. She went out. I remember we once went to a Laker game and we're sitting courtside, and she was wearing a bandana because she didn't have any hair. And back then, at the Lakers, playing for the Lakers was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who they didn't know each other. He saw Gilda, okay, with the bandana on her head, and Kareem came over to her and said, "Don't worry, Gilda, I'm bald, and I led the league in scoring last year." Okay, so there was an acknowledgement of the disease, and it was dealt with that way. She wanted to come on It's Gary Shandling show, and everybody was excited to have her. And I remember she and I took a walk on the beach one night in Santa Monica, and she said, "I really want to come on the show, but I haven't been on TV in 6-7 years now, and I'm afraid that when I come to the door, your studio audience or even the people at home is not going to remember me." Just as I was about to say, "Don't be silly," she says, "But you know something, Zweibel, I have to do your show. My comedy is the only weapon I have against this fucker." She personalized the cancer and declared war on it. She called it that fucker. And she said, "Zweibel, can you help me make cancer funny?" Well, now's the night of the show. And she wrote some cancer jokes for it. There's 300 people in the studio audience. Gary's doing a monologue. There's a knock at the door. He goes, he answers it. He sees who it is and said, "Hey, Gilda." And she steps in. He looks at the camera and goes, "Hey, everybody, it's Gilda Radner." I can't begin to tell you that 300 people that she thought wouldn't remember who she was or recognize her. I never heard an applause like this in my life. And then she started doing the cancer jokes. He said, Gilda, where have you been? I haven't seen you in a while. He said, where were you? She said, well, I've had cancer. What's your excuse? And he said, well, I've been stuck on this TV show for which there's no cure whatsoever. And all the jokes she did, and as she said the cancer jokes, I could feel the audience. There was a millisecond where they recoiled because they heard a joke about cancer, and it's as if they computed it the same way. Oh, she has it. She's allowed to. And then they laughed harder and harder. And I remember when I went to edit the show, the angle that I wanted to show, to put in of her entering, that picture from that angle was jumping just a little bit. And I couldn't figure out why at first. And then I remember the night we shot the show, the cameraman who was shooting that camera had been crying, and his hands and the stirrups were. So if you ever see that episode, look for it. It's subtle, but I left it in. And she never felt better than she did that night. We thought she was in remission. And then it caught up with her, but I still had to make my platonic friend laugh, even to the point where when I went to give blood at Cedars-Sinai, I was on the gurney. A nurse came over to me with a pad and a pen. I said, what's this? And she said, well, Gilda likes to know whose blood she's getting. Write her something nice. She's having a tough time. And I wrote, dear Gilda, I knew I'd get some fluid of mine into you one way or another, which pretty much summed up the whole relationship. And in the aftermath of it, this is to the writers out there, I went into a swoon. My work wasn't up to par. I had shows canceled, a movie which got trashed and by the critics and nobody went to see. And then my wife, Robin, said to me, you should write something about you and Gilda. And I said, no, I don't want to capitalize on that conversation. She said, to hell with that. Your best friend died 3 years ago. You haven't cried yet. And I did what I said before. I stuck my pen in my heart and I wanted to relive the whole relationship, 14 years of this platonic love story. Wanted to recreate the whole relationship. Where did we meet? Oh, behind the potted plant. And I just did dialogue. She talks, I talk, she talks, I talk. I wanted the words to touch each other. I didn't want the formality of paragraphs or semicolons, which nobody knows how to use anyway. And I then had 220 pages. I wrote it mostly at red lights. We lived in LA. I'd slowed down. The legal pad was on the seat next to me. I wanted to revisit it one more time. So it started with Behind the Plant, went through everything that I can remember, and then ended with the eulogy I gave at her memorial. And what I had ultimately became a book called Bunny Bunny, Gilda Radner's sort of love story. It was the most therapeutic thing that I, as a writer, and that I, who lost somebody to cancer, because like Adri said, we're all affected. If we don't have it now, if we're not a survivor, odds are we'll get it in the future. And there's parents, there's brothers, there are people who get it, and it's in your life. And it's got to be dealt with. And that's the way that I dealt with it, through comedy. When I was with Gilda, I had to make her laugh. That was my role. And then it got me out of whatever depression and swoon that I was in, because I finally dealt with what I went through. So it's for the survivors and the friends of and the loved ones of those who have it, where writing, my God, it's what we said earlier. You deal with the honesty of it and the bluntness of it, and you go from there.
Aid?
Well, what you're going through and what you've gone through and what you will go through with cancer is it's an epic. It's a sweeping epic. It's your life story. It's so deeply personal. And there are many ways to write about it. Alan wrote his way through it. You can say to yourself, what is it that what do I need to get out about this? Do I want to write about that crazy nurse when I was in treatment? Do I want to write about the doctor who couldn't stop hiccuping during my session, and I felt like he wasn't taking my, my appointment seriously? Is it about meeting somebody in the waiting room that had a profound effect on you? Is it the cab driver that had you get in that cab and you don't think anybody's had a worse day than you till you talk to the cab driver and he has a worse day than you? It becomes hilarious. This is the kind of waft and weave of truth that when you say to yourself, what am I going to write about? You're going to write about the hardest part of something. For Alan, it was the grief of losing her. For you, it could be any number of things that for you are your deepest fears, your deepest loves at this point. However you want to stack up the truth, other people will find this so profoundly moving and important to them. I've been to the shows and I just would sit there like this. It was so phenomenal what had been written. Now it's in your hands because you're preparing, of course, for the next one. But I learned this from Bill. When you told me you had cancer, you made it funny because you did this. I have to tell you something. I said, okay, it's kind of serious. What is it? Oh, I don't want you to get upset. So it was 20 minutes of don't get upset. I said, what is it? He said, I have cancer. But it was that lineup and you had me laughing. Well, what is it? Well, I don't want to tell the kids yet. Are you practicing? No, I just don't want to say just yet. It was a buildup and it was really, really funny. And then you went through it and you gave yourself a treat after every treatment, I think. Didn't you go get a donut or something?
Yeah. Also, I decided.
And you don't eat donuts.
When it came to telling my kids, and at the time, every cancer is serious until you know that something has been done to stop it. And I thought, I have 3 daughters and I'm very close to them. And I said, how the hell am I going to tell my kids? And so I finally called each of them and I said, I have great news. And they said, what? I said, I have completely curable cancer.
Wow.
So they never had a chance. It wasn't, and it's like comedy writing. I didn't say I have cancer, but it's curable. I did the punchline before the straight line. And I said, I have completely curable. That could have been dandruff. It could have been anything. And it still was cancer that I was telling them, but it had a positive spin on it, One thing I think it's important is we are here and we're trying to impart some stuff, but we're also trying to be entertaining and tell funny stories. But they have at their core the humanity of the people involved. And you who are watching us, however many you are the people involved, and your families are. And none of you is going to set out to write a funny, necessarily, story about your cancer. But along the way, you can give it some relief. You can give yourself some relief. As I said, nobody, I don't think, wants to talk about cancer or any other illness to make people feel bad. You have to tell them, And so it's not like and we're not telling you to sit and write funny stories about chemo. We're just saying that in the process, if you let yourself think about it and remove the pain by a couple of months or a couple of minutes or whatever the hell it is, and give it a perspective that that chemo session is not your whole life. It's a experience in your life that's terrible. And then
It's excellent.
I have
That is
one
really-
writer. What?
That's so excellent, because you are not the cancer
Yes,
having the experience of the cancer.
That's right.
It's a different.
Can't define you.
Yeah,
That's
it cannot
not what
define you.
defines you. It's a step along the way.
Yeah.
We are put on this earth. We go from one end of our lives to the other. All right. Stuff happens. And there's all these bullets flying around that have our initials on it, and sooner or later, the bullet's going to find us. Okay. And what do we do when we're hit with it? Okay. To get to the other side, we got to deal with it. All right. And we're choosing, and we're probably prescribing to deal with it with humor. It's the way, like Gilda's saying, is my comedy is the only weapon I have against this fucker. You know, another thing that she said, I remember towards the end of her life, she and I were taking a walk, and we were talking about our relationship, and also, and she, you know, she knew that, you know, she wasn't well. And she had said that when she comes back, if there's a life after this, she wants to come back as a ballerina. And I said, why? She said, because comedy is about everything that's wrong with the world. Something's too big, it's too small, it's too fat, it's too thin. He's a good president, he's a bad president. Here, she felt that being a ballerina, you were in concert with the world around you. There was something poetic about it with your surroundings. But she then said, there's no way I could have gotten through these last couple of years being a ballerina. Because I'm funny, and because I made it funny, I'm still here.
So
Now, I
great.
know that there may be people out there that think that because I don't have cancer, so far I haven't had it. I say so far because you live long enough, shit happens, okay? So I'm not speaking with any sort of purity about it or being cavalier about it whatsoever, because there's enough people that I know who had it and it broke my heart, okay? So I know about its inevitability. And I think that the best thing to do for me is that I know that if and when it hits me, how I hope I can deal with it. And we're trying to impart that to all of you, that it's, you know, once again, looking for the funny is a gift, but it's also a mindset. It's Bill's putting the word curable first before I have curable cancer. Right away, you know that no matter what comes after the word curable, it's going to be okay. It's going to be because you put it there. You didn't put it at the end where where it was a little bit of a cliffhanger, you know. So, man, I just wish. I hope we're getting through. I see over here it says 104 participants. I hope we're making an impression. I wish we were in the same room as all of you.
Yeah.
I wish that we can make eye contact. I wish that we can go around the room, tell our stories, try to have feedback and help, you know, the interplay, the synergy of comedy. I wish we could make you laugh being with you. Given that we can't at this moment, please take what we're saying to heart, because it is the best. It's the oldest cliche in the world about being the best medicine. But you want to know something? I don't know of a better one.
I don't either.
you know, I made it a point because cancer is what the people we're talking to are dealing with. And I said, you know, I know that back pain is not cancer, and I know that this is not cancer, and I know having a marriage breakup is not cancer. But at the same time, everybody has something sooner or later, and this is about not wanting the people to feel sorry for you in your stories. I don't think you do. Maybe if that's your intent, fine. I think it's about expressing something and having a need to say it, and it's you earlier at the beginning we were talking about the character that Billy Crystal plays in the movie, and that has Alzheimer's, and I have a friend who is one of my oldest and dearest and most beloved friends, and he had developed dementia, and and he's an actor, and he started to realize that he had to give up acting because he couldn't remember the lines. And so that was a blow. He lost what he was, and it got progressively bad, and he's still hanging in there, and with a wife who is a rock beside him. And she said that one night she was awakened by him shouting orders to a bunch of troops. And she got up and she said, what's happening? He said, we're shooting, stop it. I mean, yell cut. She said, honey, what's going on? He said, this is a movie. You're interrupting the movie. And she very gently, it's not a movie, you're having a moment here. And he said, damn it, I had the lead. So, I mean, there it is. Someone taken from a disastrous, painful moment and still somewhere in himself found that part of himself that nothing could change. And I think maybe that's the part that comedy is. It's the thing that nothing can change, and if it does, then you've lost the game. And God knows, I mean, I've been going through, because a lot of it, the after effects of the radiation. Be careful about when you think about it, and some bad surgical stuff that happened. And I've been going through the loss of the ability to walk and do everything that I want to do. And I don't have a great sense of humor about it, but I try. And I remember I dislocated my hip after surgery, and I was lying on the floor. I was alone. My wife was at the gym or whatever. And I was lying on the floor with the dog, and my bone, the femur, was up in my ear, and I'm lying there, and I thought, holy God, what the hell am I going to do? And I thought, wait a minute, if I grab that chair and push it over, I can push myself toward the door, because in the kitchen, my cell phone is recharging, and I hope there is a little loop that I can maybe, because there's no standing up. I mean, and the dog was going crazy, and I had to take care of her. And so I knocked the chair over, and I pushed myself through the door. And now I was in the little dining area, and I said, how am I going to get the rest of the way? I said, oh, if I grab that chair and wrap it around and do this. And then I pulled myself to that, and I got that far, and I'm in pain and the whole thing. And I stopped for a minute and said, I am fucking amazing. And I said, you're pretty, it's just, it was awful, but I was very pleased with myself. I was MacGyver, for God's sakes.
Well, you're hitting on a big theme here, Bill. This is the big one, is that no moment is insignificant.
Yeah.
To write about. No moment. There's always something in it. You just have to claim it.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Right? You pull it out. You pull it out of the life experience. It can be a tiny thing.
It's very much what Neil Simon said about that second head.
Yes.
There are moments that fly by this head, but this head up here takes notice and writes it down. And it takes a morsel and makes a seder out of it, okay? And it's important. It's important because I think it's the acknowledgement and the recognition of that stuff, which is the source of our comedy, all right? And also keeps us in touch with ourselves and our environment. And I think it's vital. I think it's vital because you take that moment, and for you to stop and give yourself a compliment like you're alone is hilarious to me.
A cheerleader.
You're a cheerleader. You know, most people go, okay, how am I going to get from here to there? But you took a moment to give yourself an applause, and I admire that.
And then when I finally got to the phone, the first thing I did was call the doorman to take the dog out. I was more worried about the dog. And then I'm a director. So when the EMS guys got there and they couldn't figure out how to get the stretcher, and I said, I think if you move that on an angle here, and I directed, and the guy said, who the hell are you? You know, and and another thing, I have one writer. I have some wonderful. I mean, I have never had a bad experience with Visible Ink. I've had about 20 participants who I've worked with, and each of them is a hero in my eyes. And there's one young woman in particular, who named the body part that she had the cancer in. So it became a character in her story. And she's going on to write a kid's book or whatever she's going to do with it, because she had another cancer. So she's named the body parts that are, and they become, she explains to them, I know you didn't do anything. It's not your fault. I probably did something. She's apologizing to the parts of her that have cancer. I mean, that's amazing in its own way. And what I'm saying that for is, you're in a drama, you're in a slice of life, and you can give it an identity while you're doing that. I had a severe neck problem back in the late 60s, and they were going to operate. And the only reason I didn't let them operate was because a week before my surgery, Jeff Chandler, the actor, died from that surgery. So I said, well, I'm not going to do that then. And so the option was to go into traction 24 hours a day for 6 weeks with a 10-pound weight and a chin strap laying you down like that.
You have a photograph of this, of looking in the mirror to direct.
Yeah, there were glasses
It's
you
hilarious.
can get. Yeah, there's glasses you can get that are beveled if you have to lie down. But at any rate, it was maddening. And my twins were 3 years old, and I had a hospital bed next to the bed, and they thought it was a trampoline. So every time they would jump on it, it would pull me down even further. But I was going crazy. And then they launched the moonshot. And I decided that the astronauts were in a space capsule. They had limited, I was going to be an astronaut. And that's how I was getting through like about 5 days of this. And I got so good at it that I got pissed off that Walter Cronkite never mentioned my name. And I decided it's because I was Jewish.
May I drill into this for a second? Because
Sure.
I think you're hitting the essential why write, why create? Because it gives you, in the state that you're in, you were in traction, it gives you a place to go. It's why we read. It's why we write, because we are not in our bodies with cancer. We're imagining We're using our imagination to take us out of it. What you just described, Bill, is like the core essential mission of writing, which is to tell a story in truth that lifts you out and away from something. When Alan describes how it lifted his grief, think about what he did. He wrote a story that he said, I started at the beginning. And then I wrote it all the way through. And when I got to the end, I was galvanized to keep going. Bill, the same thing. It gives you that place to go. So if you're in a reality that is a little overwhelming or horrifying, and we all three have been in them, writing is the salvation because it lifts you up and out. And don't ask yourself the question, am I a writer? Because every human being that was ever born is a storyteller. You have a story.
I have to interrupt. I got a text from Valerie David, who was one of my participant writers.
Mm-hmm.
And she's had 3 times the cancer came back. And she wrote a one-woman show called The Pink Hulk that she has performed all over the world. And she is the toughest, I mean the dearest, but I mean strong. She went on and did the show after she got the call that she had the remission had been interrupted and it was back again, and she went on and did the show in San Francisco or wherever it was before she flew back to the doctor. And she just told her story and did this thing, and it's a beautiful show that she created out of 3 fights with cancer. She turned it into a show.
You know what it does, Bill, apropos what you just said and Adriana said, it takes something which is incredibly internal and it puts it outside of you, and it almost objectifies it in a way that you can manipulate it, you can write it, you can hone it, you can own it. When it's inside, it's got you. If you get it out, you know, we as writers, we write scripts in a way we're God. You know, we create situations, we make up characters, and then if we're successful with what we're writing, the characters get free will. And if they tell you by page 7, no, I don't want to do this. I want to do that. Okay. And then we follow them and they take on a life of their own, but we're getting it out of ourselves and we're looking at it in front of us. And as far as writing about the cancer is concerned, you know, one of Fran Drescher, the actress,
Mm-hmm.
she's got, and this is important, her charity is called Cancer Schmancer. Those 2 words, I've always felt, say a million words because there's an attitude there. Cancer Schmancer. Right away, there's a little bit of wit there. Yeah, there's a rhyme, but there's an attitude. Cancer Schmancer. Okay. Julia Sweeney also had that show, God Said Ha, right? Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of comedians who have had cancer who talk about that experience. Once again, it's taken something internal, making it external. And once it's external, we can deal with it. If there's something tangible about it, we can confront it because it's right there, as opposed to inside where it's bothering us and we can't deal with it. You know,
it takes the fear away too.
Absolutely.
To put it out there.
You know,
the fear of it.
Manipulate it.
To be afraid of.
There you go.
I was very, very close to Mary Tyler Moore, you know, from our days on the Van Dyke Show. And when she moved to New York, I was the only real friend she had. So it was like everywhere she went, I was going to, you know, be with her. And we had an amazing relationship. And then toward the end, I mean, it wasn't cancer for Mary, it was diabetes. And she, it's funny. I know there was a big funeral service for her, a memorial service in LA, but Joanna and I were at the one that was in Connecticut where she lived, and it was a cold and dreary day. And as opposed to the people in LA, which were all the people involved in her show business life, the people in Connecticut were all the people from the Diabetes Foundation and all the doctors and parents and their kids and all that stuff. But the point is, toward the end, she wanted to do a one-woman show. And I was working on it with her. And she was in really bad shape. I mean, she had to turn her whole body around to see where someone, it was not good. But we were working on the show, and it was called A Sit Down with Mary Tyler Moore. And it was about each of the chairs that had been in her career. The sofa from the Van Dyke Show and dealing with that, then her desk chair from Mary, then the chair from the movie, that she did.
Ordinary People?
Yeah, Ordinary People. And then there was the chair where the doctor told her about her diabetes. And it was really on its way to being something. And then she became weaker and weaker, and so we stopped working on it. But she was brave.
But she didn't stop.
No.
This is our
Never.
point.
Never.
Another important thing, there's no reason to stop.
And
You're
yes.
right. But
this is probably having more of an effect on me than anybody we're talking to, because I've been in such God, don't fall. That's my most important wish in the world. At any rate, at the funeral, there was this huge thing of roses, and Robert, her husband, said, "We all know how Mary loved roses, so I'd like each of you to put a rose on her coffin." And I just kept thinking, what could I say to Mary to sum up what I felt about her and and we ended up having a fight at the end. She got angry at me because somebody called me, and Joanna said, "It's Mary," and I said, "Mary who?" And she said, "Mary who?" I said, "Well, I know a couple of Marys," but at any rate, and as I got, I would say you were there, and when I got there, all I could say was, "Oh, Rob." Could there be anything else to say to her and express everything?
And everybody laughed.
No, it was quiet. It was quiet. It was just,
when you said,
may
"Oh,
have
Rob,"
laughed, but I don't know, huh?
When you said, "Oh, Rob," I would have laughed.
Oh, Rob.
Would have been perfect.
Yeah. So what else can we say? It's in all of these things, it is usually easier for us to be the ones who provide the humor about ourselves. It's pretty dangerous for someone else to do it, don't you think?
Yeah. I think too that I'm sure in our participants that there are folks who are saying, "But how do I do it?" Now I understand that, they're saying, "I understand now, I have to sit down, I think that to get into it, that you have to have some steps. And by that I mean it helps me to first thing in the morning to work. Because the sleep, if you've been able to sleep and if you're sleeping, that you come out of your dream state and that's when you're really raw and ready to go. And if you work when nobody else is working, you have more of a sense of accomplishment. So if it's the first thing in the morning, and you have, I recommend a sacred space, that there's only a pen you write with, that you don't write your grocery bills, you don't pay your, it's just for your writing in a particular notebook, so that you go into the world each day that is uniquely your own. Do you feel that way, Alan, Bill?
I'm nodding because I wake up 5:30 every morning, and I leave our bedroom and I go down maybe 4 or 5 steps, and I make a right turn into my study. Now I'm in my office, okay? And I start, and I can tell how productive I was, and you can tell how productive I was, because once I shave, it's over. Okay, it's over. I gotta stay. Yeah, coffee I'll allow myself, but I gotta stay in that
Right.
place where I was when I woke up. It's the most honest one. The phones don't ring, and you're still somewhere between sleep and consciousness, and you're too tired to put up walls, I find. I find that it's the most honest time of the day because of that. Now, there are some people who stay up all night and write, you know, but I would urge anybody who wants to write and is going to start to write, find the part of the day, and it could be very well like me and Adriana. Bill, when do you write?
Lately, never.
I
But
see.
But that's not true. You just sent me a piece and it's brilliant. You can't say that.
well,
Okay. I doubted you.
I'm just
You're still
just at a lapse for the moment for the last name of the director. Oh God, great one. I did some like it hot.
Billy Wilder.
Billy Wilder.
Billy Wilder.
Great writer and director. And someone asked him what his process was as a writer. And he said, well, I live in Los Angeles. I go into the office at about 6 o'clock in the morning. And I make a pot of coffee and I get the papers and I read the papers. And by the time I'm through, it's a little later. And so people are awake in New York. So I call some people in New York and we talk. And then I have a lunch date. And I'll have lunch, and then I'll go and check my mail. And then I'll call some people in New York to see if anything is new. And then I stand in front of the window and wait for 3 cars with Indiana license plates to go by. That's what it needs to get him to write.
It's amazing. Everybody's process is different.
Well, when I was your age, it was different, I must say. I wrote a lot, but at this stage of the game, you know, I'm not writing that much. I'm going to start though, because I'm very inspired by what you two have said.
Well, you know something, my friend Dave Barry, who I write a lot with, I asked him, because then this is for the writers out there or people who want to write, is this thing called writer's block, you know, and
I live there. I have an apartment.
yeah, no, I saw you. I walked by it the other day. And I said to Dave, I said, how do you deal with writer's block? And he said, the same way I deal with constipation. I just sit there waiting for something to come out. Okay? And so once again, there's the common thing that we all experience and going beyond it. It's curable cancer. Okay. It's when do we land? It's all of that. Now, obviously, I'm not making any comparisons to it, but these are the tools that we use. This is the mindset that we all have. And the hardest thing to do, you know, look, when you're on a television show, it's fun. It's collaborative. It's a pizza at 2 o'clock in the morning because there's 7 people around the table trying to think of better jokes that's already in the script. And when you're alone and you got to fill up a bunch of blank pages, Adriana, you write the biggest, thickest novels
I
in the
know.
world. They're fantastic.
Thank
They're
you.
riveting. But my Lord, it's wow. I'll go, all right, she got another book. Okay, I got to read another 1,000 pages.
Got another one coming out.
It's and they're great. It's so we all have our own method of getting out, like Dave Barry says, waiting for something to come out, how it comes out. So anybody who wants to be a writer or is thinking about writing, I think the hardest thing to do, but the most necessary thing to do, is wake up and start writing. Don't give it a second thought. Just
Well, there's a scientific principle behind that.
go ahead, tell me.
Well, okay, the easiest way I could describe it is, when you have to go on a trip and you have to catch a plane at 5 o'clock in the morning and you don't get up at 3 a.m. Usually you get up at 6 or whatever. And you call everybody, you tell your wife, is that the thing? I can't miss this flight. And everybody, and I have to leave the house I got to get up at 3 a.m. because I got to leave at 3:30, and you have everything packed and ready to go. And you go to bed the night before and you say to yourself, I got to get up at 3:30. And if anybody within the sound of my voice had this experience, before the alarms go off, you wake up. Have you had that experience?
Oh, of course.
Have you had it, Alan?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
There's a book, I don't want to get up and get it, that was given to me. I'd been doing this for years. I didn't know what it was. But before I would go to sleep at night, I go, what am I going to write about in the morning when I get up? Well, I got Pam on a ladder. I got to get her down. And I go to sleep and I wake up with the answer, because your subconscious is what keeps you alive. Now just start to let this settle in when it comes to everything that you're going through. Cancer, writing about the cancer, living in the world. The knowingness is already in you. I do not believe in writer's block. I don't believe in it. If you engage the subconscious, and there's ways to do it, and it's very simple, it becomes your habit and you wake up with it. So all that stuff first thing in the morning is really the great stuff. It might not make sense to you when you're doing it, but welcome to the world of being a writer. Everything you put on that piece of paper somehow matters. You're not going to use it, maybe. It doesn't make sense, or it's the beginning of something.
Well, two things. First of all, Ernest Hemingway always ended his writing session by knowing the next sentence he was going to write.
Wow.
So that when he came in the morning or whenever he did it,
Yeah.
he didn't have to think what he was going to do. That said, we're talking on a level about writers and us, and most of the people we're talking to want to write, not to be writers as such. They want to tell their story. And
They want to use it as a tool.
yes, I
Right.
think so. I think so.
Okay.
Some of them
Good.
that I've worked with want to write a book.
Right.
And so Invisible Ink, you can write about, I said invisible ink, at visible ink. I was afraid to say invisible ink. It's very visible. And I've had a couple of writers who wanted to write books, and you can write about anything you want if you're a participant. But most of the people want to tell that story.
Yes.
And that's what we're trying to help them accomplish with some humor in it. If they never write another thing, that piece that they are writing is their chance to incorporate some of what we're talking about. And a lot of the writers want to write their life story, and and I always start by saying, if you give yourself that assignment, it's a huge chunk. Your memoir is a string of beads, and just write a bead at a time. They don't even have to be the way you're going to end up stringing them. Write the bead that exists at that moment.
That's
And then
great.
you put them all on a table and you have fun. Well, I'll put this one here. No, I need another blue one here. I need a gray one here. I need this. Yes, have we overstayed our welcome?
You have not, and I overstayed my unwelcome because I was so fascinated by every single thing every one of you had to say that I couldn't interrupt you and say, wait a minute, I have some dumb questions to ask you guys. So I decided to let you speak. And every word you've said and every truth you've told is a gift to all of us who sit and read what you write, who admire what you do, who laugh at the stuff you say, who understand the healing power of humor. And I must say that as somebody who speaks to everybody, I have spoken to all of the thousands of people who have joined Visible Inc. in the 13 years that we've been in business.
Wow.
And every one of them calls with the idea that they know they have a story they want to write. Many of them have a book they want to write, but they're always a little hesitant to presume that their story is worth anything. But they make that call because they understand that what connects us, what draws us together, what makes us people of the universe and connects all of us to one another, no matter what we're going through, is that we all have a story. Many of us have funny stories. I think all of us have funny stories that if we allow ourselves, as you say, to look at the other head, to listen with the other ear, to think with the other brain, we can be funny, but we can also be serious. We can write about what we're going through, but we can also allow our stories to be a beacon for other people. And every one of you, every word that you gifted to us tonight has been fabulous. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And all of you, Invisible Inc., go out and get the books by these fabulous people. Watch what they do. Go see Alan's movie.
Oh, God, yes.
Oh, yeah, go see the movie.
Absolutely.
Alan, I hope it is as big as I think it is.
Smash hit.
Thank you.
Here
Anybody
again.
wants my books, just write to me. I'll send them to you.
Great. Well,
Yeah, just write to me.
you got to think about the royalties, Adri. You got to think about the
I have enough cheese. I'm all right.
As I said when I started, I've
enough.
spoken at a million events, and I've written to these three. Well, do you think we should do this? Do you think? Because I take this audience so seriously as a special audience, and I don't care how funny I've been elsewhere and how many times I've done it. I wanted you to be entertained and have an evening, but I wanted, most important, that somehow you would personally get something out of this that would help you move forward.
Well, we have all of us. We thank you. You're wonderful. We love you.
Thank you guys, Adrian, Alan, who are not part of Visible Inc., for taking their time, and Alan on the eve of his biggest success yet.
And by the way,
devote himself to us.
That's the perfect example, everybody. Alan just told you he had years where things were great, the years of whatever, fallow, and then here he is. Here he is. He's doing it. It's fantastic, and I bet you appreciate it more than any ever.
You know something, I'm very well aware, and I told this to my kids today. If there's an example at all that you take away from me, is you just keep rowing, you know, and you just keep.
That's right.
You keep rowing, and yeah, it's there are fallow periods. There's and it's how you get up off the mat. You know what I mean? It's not that you're on the mat, because we're all on the mat. So one time or another, you get up and go forward. But yeah, there is a certain appreciation that this part is happening at this point, which is a little bit later, you know, where there had been a lot of success at the beginning and at different parts. But I'm very appreciative of it. But what we've imparted this evening, I must say that I got a lot out of it. I got a lot out of it listening to Bill and Adriana, okay? It makes me go, all right, what I'm doing isn't so unusual. They have their own versions of it. And I think that the people that we're speaking to, if you glean anything from what we've said tonight, we all have our own versions of where we want to get. We may take different paths to it. One might wake up at 5 o'clock, one may wake up at noon, or whatever it is. But at its essence, what are we talking about? What's your truth? How are you going to deal with it? An audience or a reader can smell a fraud a mile away,
True.
okay? And they're going to react to it like this because it's not going to ring true. Be brave enough to be honest with yourself. Be brave enough to be brutally honest with yourself. Make the acknowledgement that, yeah, the food tastes like airplane food, but then go to the joke about when are we going to land. I mean, I think that's the most apt thing that I've heard this evening.
And don't ask, is it good? Does my experience matter? Because it does. You go through the door. Don't even question that. Just write your story.
So the tech is breathing down our necks.
Oh dear.
At this point, I want to
He's probably
say,
hungry.
no, I want to say thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Adri, Bill, and Alan. You were fabulous, wonderful. We love you. We adore you. Thank you.
So excited.
Thank you,
Go,
guys.
go see Here Again.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night,
Bill.
guys.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you,
Good
Judy.
night.
Thank you, Judith.